Imagine having a piece of computer code that could just instantly, bloodlessly turn off a dictatorship.
Like a literal off switch.
Exactly. No bombs, no riots, zero collateral damage, just a total systemic shutdown of a regime's military and financial networks while, leaving the civilian hospitals and water supplies perfectly intact.
It sounds like magic. Or, well, pure science fiction.
Right. But now imagine a seasoned political organizer looking at that magical futuristic button and telling you it's completely useless unless you first knock on a million doors and physically organize a movement.
Which is such a jarring combination of ideas.
It really is. So welcome to the Deep Dive. For you listening right now, it's Sunday, April 12, 2026. The world is incredibly tense, and today we are looking at this deeply specific, intensely passionate artifact that tries to fuse the gritty, dangerous reality of street-level protests with godlike artificial intelligence.
Yeah, we have a really fascinating document to dissect today.
We do. The source material is a single blog post titled Bhagat Face, Time for DemocracyTech to Flourish for Iran. And it's written by Paramendra Kumar Bhagat.
Right.
And our mission for this deep dive is to unpack this manifesto, because it's basically like finding a blueprint that is half political thriller and half sci-fi tech manual.
What's fascinating here is how the author synthesizes two completely different eras of problem solving.
How do you mean?
Well, you have the analog, boots-on-the-ground reality of human protest on one hand, and then you have the theoretical, surgical precision of future technologies on the other. He's basically demanding sweat equity from the diaspora while simultaneously praying for a technological deus ex machina.
Totally. Now, before we go any further, I really need to place a rigid frame around this for you listening.
Yeah, that's crucial here.
Because this blog post is a manifesto. It contains exceptionally strong, politically charged views. I mean, the author advocates for regime change in Iran, discusses military intervention, and dives into some highly sensitive theological territory.
Very sensitive.
So our mission here is not to endorse or validate any of these viewpoints. We are absolutely not taking sides. Whether you lean left, right, or center, our goal is strictly to analyze the architecture of the author's arguments as presented in the text.
Right. We just want to understand the raw ideas, the internal logic, and, the actual mechanics of what he is proposing in this specific time capsule.
Exactly. So to understand that architecture, we really have to look at the foundation he pours in the very first paragraph.
Which is his own background.
Right. He plants this flag regarding his identity, saying, I was Barack Obama's first full-time volunteer in New York City.
And he isn't bringing up his resume just to brag. He is establishing his whole epistemological framework. I mean, a field organizer views the world through a very specific lens.
Oh, completely. They view it through like clipboards, voter registration forms, folding chairs in a stuffy community center.
Yeah, it's not glamorous.
If you've never worked on a grassroots campaign, it is the least glamorous work imaginable. It's knocking on doors in the pouring rain, making hundreds of phone calls where people just hang up on you, and slowly convincing one apathetic person at a time to care enough to show up.
And that specific background dictates his entire philosophy on how regimes fall. He uses this really distinct analogy to hammer it home.
The fintech one, right.
Exactly. He writes, just like there is no fintech without finance, there is no democracy tech without democracy.
Which is a bold claim.
It is. He's arguing for a strict causal relationship. For this author, the technology is completely downstream from the human intent.
I kind of want to challenge that premise, though.
Go for it.
Because history shows us a completely different dynamic sometimes. Look at the Arab Spring, or even the Green Movement in Iran back in 2009.
Right, the Twitter revolution.
Yeah. Technology didn't just support the democracy movement. It acted as the spark that created the environment for it to even happen. Twitter and Facebook bypassed state media.
True.
People didn't need to meet in a community center to realize they all hated the regime. The platform showed them they weren't alone instantly. Tech led the charge there.
Well, the author would actually categorize that as a dangerous illusion.
Really? How so?
Because a flash mob is not political infrastructure. Yes, social media acts as an accelerant to anger, sure, but anger without a containment vessel just burns out, or it gets crushed.
So it's about what happens next.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you rely on the technology to do the organizing for you, you end up with 1 million people in a square who have no leadership, no agreed-upon demands, and, critically, no plan for what happens when the military shuts down the cell towers.
Ah, right. The inevitable blackout.
So he's looking at Iran in 2026 and insisting that if the people aren't physically organized into a cohesive political body first, all the tech in the world is just useless hardware. You can't, like, code your way out of tyranny if no one is willing to take physical risks.
Wow. And he takes that demand for physical action and pushes it into an incredibly intense moral binary, doesn't he?
Oh, he leaves no wiggle room whatsoever.
Yeah, he creates this framework where neutrality simply does not exist. He addresses the Iranian diaspora directly and says, if you are anti-war like I am, then do the peaceful things. But if you are doing nothing, then you are pro-war. You make war possible. You make war inevitable.
It's intense. It totally strips away any comfort of being a passive observer.
It's an aggressive rhetorical trap.
Designed to shatter complacency. By framing inaction as an active endorsement of violence, he removes the middle ground entirely.
Which is hard for people watching from afar.
Right, because often diaspora communities watching a crisis from abroad feel this sense of survivor's guilt mixed with powerlessness. They might post on social media and feel, they've done their part.
But he's saying that's not enough.
He's telling them their passive sympathy is functionally equivalent to handing bullets to the regime. If you do not build a peaceful alternative to the current government, you're guaranteeing that the only way things will ever change is through catastrophic warfare.
Man, so since he equates apathy with being pro-war, what exactly does he define as peaceful things? Because he doesn't just leave it as some vague call for good vibes.
No, he demands immediate, highly specific action.
Right. He tells the diaspora to organize marches, form massive organizations, and initiate huge membership drives. But the core mechanism of this entire blueprint is this thing he calls the Common Minimum Program.
Yeah, the Common Minimum Program. In political science, that's basically an emergency coalition strategy.
Like when enemies have to work together.
Exactly. It's deployed when deeply fractured, ideologically opposed groups realize they share a single existential threat.
So it's often explained as putting a supergroup band together, but I honestly think that implies way too much harmony.
Yeah, they definitely don't want to make music together.
Right. A Common Minimum Program is more like the scaffolding on a skyscraper. It's ugly, it's temporary, and nobody wants to live in it permanently.
That's a great way to put it.
But if you try to build the penthouse before you put the scaffolding up, the entire structure collapses and kills everyone. And the author is arguing the Iranian diaspora keeps trying to paint the penthouse while the building is on fire.
The scaffolding analogy is highly accurate, and he lays out the exact planks of this scaffolding.
What are they?
Well, you need an interim government, an interim constitution that strictly guarantees human rights and democracy, and this is key, a non-negotiable 12-month timeline to hold elections for a constituent assembly.
So, a strict ticking clock.
Yes, because he is acutely aware of how revolutions fail. Think about the Bolsheviks hijacking the Russian Revolution, or the clerics outmaneuvering the leftists and liberals after the fall of the Shah in 1979.
Right, the power vacuum problem.
Exactly. When a vacuum opens, the most ruthless, best organized faction invariably seizes control, unless there is a pre-existing, universally agreed-upon framework that limits interim power.
So he's demanding they build the structural guardrails before the regime even begins to crack. But let's be realistic here. You can't just put 1 million people on the streets of Tehran with clipboards to debate a constitution right now.
No, they'd be wiped out.
Right, the sheer danger of human organizing under an authoritarian state creates this massive physical vulnerability. So how does he propose protecting this human capital?
This is where he finally introduces the concept of DemocracyTech.
And it is surprisingly mundane, honestly. He points to the smartphone.
He labels the smartphone the ultimate democracy tech. And the crucial detail he adds is that it remains the ultimate tool even when the regime completely cuts off internet access.
Which seems totally counterintuitive. I mean, if you can't broadcast the footage, what good is the camera?
Well, his argument relies entirely on asymmetric numbers. He claims the regime is outnumbered by the citizens 100 to 1.
Wow, 100 to 1.
Right. And if you are outnumbered 100 to 1, the smartphone stops being just a communication device. It becomes a weapon of mass documentation.
He instructs the protesters to, quote, record all atrocities you see.
We really have to look at the psychological weight of this. It is the inversion of the panopticon.
Remind me, the panopticon is the prison concept, right?
Yeah, it's a concept where the state can see everyone, so the citizens behave as if they are constantly watched, internalizing their own oppression.
But he wants to flip that.
Exactly. The author is proposing a decentralized, citizen-run panopticon turned back onto the enforcers themselves.
So even if a besieged militiaman knows the internet is down in that moment.
He also knows that 5 different offline smartphones are currently recording his face from 5 different angles.
Oh, wow. He knows those files exist in a physical hard drive in someone's pocket.
Right.
He knows that the moment the internet flickers back on, or the moment someone smuggles that SD card across a border, his face will be tied to that atrocity permanently.
It introduces this immense psychological friction into the machinery of state violence.
Because a regime relies on anonymity.
Exactly. They rely on the anonymity of their enforcers to commit atrocities. When you strip away that anonymity using millions of lenses, you force every low-level soldier to calculate their own post-regime liability.
Am I going to jail for this next year?
Right. The tech isn't organizing the protests. The tech is weaponizing the sheer volume of the human presence to deter the violence.
Okay, but despite having the 100-to-1 numbers advantage, and despite having millions of cameras ready to record, the author identifies a massive psychological roadblock preventing the diaspora from succeeding.
He does, and he uses a very harsh, jarring analogy to describe it.
He likens the Iranian diaspora today to die-hard communists inside the USSR and the Russians in exile who are also die-hard communists.
Which is quite a leap.
Right. If you are listening to this, you might be wondering why a 2026 political organizer is suddenly dragging Cold War Soviet dynamics into a discussion about the Middle East.
He is dissecting the concept of ideological baggage.
How so?
Well, during the Cold War, you had Russian dissidents who fled to the West because they were terrified of Stalin's purges. They hated the specific dictator.
Sure.
But many of them still clung to the foundational dogma of Marxist-Leninism. They believed the system was fundamentally correct, just poorly executed by the wrong men.
I see.
And the author is leveling a devastating critique at the Iranian diaspora here. He's accusing them of suffering from the exact same affliction regarding the intersection of state and religion.
Right. He argues they oppose the specific clerics holding power, but they refuse to untangle themselves from the underlying theological framework the regime uses to justify that power in the first place.
He calls this a lack of spiritual clarity on Islam.
And he establishes a brutal acid test for this clarity.
Yes, he does.
Because he doesn't demand they abandon their faith. He explicitly notes, you can be Muslim if you want to. But the non-negotiable prerequisite for entering his common minimum program is an absolute unwavering agreement on freedom of religion.
And he specifies exactly what that means.
He does. He means the freedom to choose to stop being Muslim. Apostasy.
Now, why do you think this specific point, the freedom to leave the religion, is the absolute linchpin of his entire argument?
Well, I think it's because if you harbor the belief, even secretly, that apostasy is a crime deserving of punishment, you are still operating within the regime's ideological universe.
Exactly.
You might want different people administering the punishment, but you still believe in the tyranny itself.
That's his point precisely. He is telling the diaspora that true democratic organizing is biologically impossible if the organizers don't believe in absolute freedom of conscience.
So he gives them an ultimatum.
He says if you do not support the freedom to leave the religion, you are a supporter of the regime.
He leaves zero room for nuance.
Yeah.
And to drive this point home, he deliberately removes the typical political personalities from the equation.
Which is an interesting tactic.
Yeah, he writes, this is not about Reza Pahlavi. This is not about what he will do or not do.
Now, for context, Reza Pahlavi is the exiled crown prince of Iran.
Right, a figure around whom a lot of the opposition orbits. So by waving him away, the author places the burden entirely on the ordinary Iranians.
It's not about waiting for a savior anymore.
Exactly. It's about whether the average person in exile will do the hard, unglamorous work of forming an umbrella organization based on human rights.
And dismissing the figureheads is a classic grassroots organizing tactic.
Why is that?
Because a single leader can be compromised, they can be discredited or assassinated, but a decentralized umbrella organization united by a baseline commitment to fundamental human rights is incredibly resilient.
Harder to kill an idea than a person.
Exactly. He is forcing the responsibility down to the grassroots level.
Okay, so let's assume they pull it off. Let's say they overcome decades of ideological roadblocks. They agree on the common minimum program, and they organize the diaspora.
Okay, the scaffolding is up.
Right, then the text shifts gears violently. It moves from these deep political and spiritual critiques into a hyper-specific, escalating tactical timeline.
He sets an 8-week countdown.
8 weeks. He believes it will take about 8 weeks of intensive organizing for the people to effectively take to the streets en masse.
But this is where we hit the most aggressive and frankly controversial claim in the entire manifesto.
Yeah, this part is wild. He anticipates the regime's violent response, specifically mentioning the Basij paramilitary forces. And he declares, should the Basij goons show up on motorbikes with their machine guns, they need to be taken out aerially.
Which is just a staggering escalation in the rhetoric.
It really is. And it requires a careful analysis of how he perceives the mechanics of power. Because if you're listening to this right now and thinking, wait, didn't he just say he was anti-war?
Right, do the peaceful things.
Exactly. Didn't he just tell the diaspora to do peaceful things?
Right.
You are not alone in thinking that's a massive contradiction.
It seems completely paradoxical.
How can an author claim to be staunchly anti-war while simultaneously calling for aerial military strikes to assassinate regime enforcers on city streets?
To understand that paradox, you really have to look at his definition of a peaceful protest under an authoritarian regime.
How does he define it?
Well, in a functioning democracy, a peaceful protest is protected by the state. The police block off the road for you.
Sure.
But in a totalitarian system, a peaceful protest is essentially a mass suicide march if the state decides to open fire.
Right. They don't have those protections.
The author argues that, quote, the right to peacefully protest has to be protected. In his logic, asking unarmed citizens with smartphones to face machine guns isn't a protest, it's a massacre.
So he believes that a peaceful revolution against a heavily armed regime actually requires a protective, militarized umbrella to succeed.
Precisely. He views the aerial strikes not as an offensive act of war, but as a surgical defensive perimeter.
A defensive perimeter.
Yes, it is the concept of overwhelming kinetic force used exclusively to create a safe zone for democratic expression.
But the logistics of this in reality are mind-boggling.
Oh, practically impossible.
Yeah, I mean, organizing targeted aerial drone strikes inside a sovereign nation without triggering a massive regional war or without accidentally killing the very protesters you're trying to protect.
The intelligence required for that is staggering.
Exactly. The AI, or human intelligence, needed to distinguish a Basij militant on a motorbike from a civilian in the middle of a chaotic street protest.
Yeah.
Just doesn't exist flawlessly.
The tactical reality is fraught with catastrophic danger. I mean, a single errant strike that kills a family turns the entire narrative of a peaceful revolution into a story of foreign imperialist aggression.
And the regime would instantly use it to justify martial law.
Instantly. But within the strict internal logic of his manifesto, he just kind of ignores the friction of war. He treats the aerial cover as a clean, clinical prerequisite for the people's peaceful victory.
Okay, so let's follow his highly optimistic timeline. The people organize in 8 weeks.
Fact.
They take to the streets. The aerial strikes miraculously protect them without causing collateral damage.
Check.
The regime falls. What happens the day after?
Well, the author paints a picture of rapid, almost utopian stabilization.
He describes a floodgates open moment, doesn't he?
He does. He assumes the new interim government will instantly deal with the international community. They'll end the nuclear program, curb the ballistic missile program, and dismantle the proxy war network across the Middle East.
Just like that. And the economic reward for these concessions is immediate in his mind.
Absolutely. He predicts the absolute lifting of all economic sanctions.
Which would be huge.
Massive. And he says this will result in strongly refutes the transition from an authoritarian system to a functional democracy is chaotic, it's bloody, and it takes decades.
Yeah, there's always deeply rooted corruption.
Corruption, institutional decay, bureaucratic sabotage by the remnants of the old regime. But you know, the author's vision is rooted in a profound belief in the suppressed human capital of Iran.
The people themselves.
Right. He believes the entrepreneurial energy and the education of the populace will act as an immediate stabilizing force once the artificial constraints of the clerics are removed.
Okay, so this is where the deep dive enters truly uncharted territory.
My favorite part.
Because the author doesn't actually rely solely on human protests, diaspora organizing, and aerial military cover to achieve this clean break.
No, he introduces a wild card.
A wild card straight out of his own science fiction writing. He introduces the phrase Anthropic's mythos, and he declares it the ultimate democracy tech.
Now, Anthropic is a real-world artificial intelligence safety and research company.
Right, they exist today.
But mythos in this context is a theoretical AI construct. It's an extrapolation of what he believes the technology will be capable of in the very near future.
And he explicitly blends his own fiction into this real-world geopolitical crisis. He writes, I envisioned something like that in my novel that came out last year, The Great Subcontinent Uprising.
So he spent time lore building this concept in his fiction.
Exactly, before applying it as a serious solution to a real-world war scenario. And look at the claim he makes about what this mythos can do. He states it can disable the regime completely with zero damage.
Zero damage.
Right. He claims everything can be back and working as soon as the regime is gone. He literally rechristens this hypothetical AI as LibertyTech.
Wow, LibertyTech. What he's describing here is the absolute holy grail of cyber warfare.
An EMP without the EMP.
Exactly. An agentic AI capable of executing a hyper-targeted nation-state level shutdown without the electromagnetic pulse frying every computer in the country.
Let's break down the how of this because it sounds like magic. How does an AI just turn off a regime?
In theory, an agentic AI, which is an artificial intelligence capable of making autonomous decisions and executing complex, multi-step goals, would infiltrate the foundational digital infrastructure of the state.
So not just hacking a website.
Oh no, it wouldn't just launch a DDoS attack to crash a propaganda page. It would quietly rewrite the logic controllers in the military communications grid.
Oh, wow.
It would alter the banking ledgers to freeze the assets of the Revolutionary Guard. It would scramble the logistics software the military uses to deploy troops.
But wait, the regime's most sensitive military networks are almost certainly air-gapped, right?
Yes, usually.
They aren't connected to the public internet precisely to prevent this kind of thing. We saw this with Stuxnet years ago, where they had to physically get the malware into the facility on a thumb drive.
And that is the crucial technical hurdle. The author is envisioning an AI so sophisticated it can bridge those air gaps.
Wow.
Perhaps by weaponizing compromised devices near the facilities or exploiting zero-day vulnerabilities in the hardware supply chain itself before the machines are even installed.
That's terrifyingly plausible down the line.
But more importantly, he is imagining an AI with surgical moral precision.
Moral precision.
Yes. He wants a cyber weapon that can instantly brick the command and control centers of the elite forces without accidentally shutting down the hospital ventilators.
Oh, right. Or the civilian water purification plants.
Or the telecommunications networks the protesters are using to organize.
It is the ultimate technocratic fantasy of a bloodless coup. It's the desire to hit a Control-Alt-Delete on a dictatorship.
Just restart the system.
Yeah. No messy street battles, no infrastructure destroyed that will take 20 years to rebuild, just a pristine transfer of power facilitated by a godlike algorithm.
It really reveals a profound tension in his philosophy, doesn't it?
It does. We spent the first half of this discussion analyzing his fervent, almost militant belief in the necessity of human action.
Right. The messy, slow, difficult work of diaspora organizing and forming common minimum programs.
But here at the end, he reaches for a technological bypass. He wants the human struggle, but he desperately wants the consequences of that struggle mitigated by a flawless machine intelligence.
He wants a safety net.
Exactly. So to truly grasp the scale, the urgency, and frankly, the anxiety driving this single blog post, we have to pull all the way back.
We need to look at the big picture.
We have to look at the ecosystem this post lives in. We have to look at the state of the world on that specific Sunday, April 12, 2026. Because a listener today needs to understand why an author is frantically combining clipboard politics with sci-fi AI weapons.
Context is everything here. The blog post does not exist in a vacuum. The metadata, the sidebar links, the news tickers visible on the page, they paint a very vivid, very terrifying picture of the author's environment.
Let me read you the stats. This blog has over 4.8 million total page views.
That's huge.
And his output is staggering. In the year 2025 alone, the archive shows he published 1,333 posts.
Wait, really?
Yes, that is an average of almost 4 in-depth essays every single day. In July 2025 alone, he posted 238 times.
That volume of output indicates a mind operating at a frantic pace. He is constantly processing, synthesizing, and reacting to global data streams.
It's like he's racing against a ticking clock.
It is the footprint of someone who believes time is running out.
And the sidebar features a massive list of books he has authored. The titles are this incredible, dizzying tapestry of AI forecasting, economic theory, political prophecy, and fiction.
What kind of titles?
Well, sitting right next to his demands for Iran, you see titles like AI in Global Education and Agentic AI, set to explode in 2026.
So heavy tech focus.
But then there is highly specific political fiction, like Trump's Default, The Mist of Empire, and deeply spiritual, almost apocalyptic treatises like Kalkiism, the economic and spiritual blueprint for an age of abundance.
And the last age, Lord Kalki, Prophecy, and the Final War for Peace.
Exactly.
The book titles reveal that he is not just a single-issue geopolitical analyst. He views himself as a macro synthesizer.
Everything is connected.
Right. When he writes about a protest in Tehran, he is filtering it through his understanding of global supply chains, the exponential growth curves of artificial intelligence, American domestic politics, and Hindu eschatology.
He fundamentally believes human civilization is at a singular inflection point.
And when you look at the news ticker visible on his blog that day, you can see why he feels the world is on fire.
Yeah, let's reconstruct the global atmosphere of April 12, 2026. It is a powder keg.
Sure.
The New York Times top story is, oil prices surge above $100 after peace talks fail and Trump threatens blockade.
Oil surging past $100 a barrel changes the entire mathematical equation for the Iranian regime.
It gives them a lifeline.
A huge one. High oil prices provide autocracies with an influx of untraceable capital. They use it to fund their paramilitary forces, solidify their domestic control, and expand their proxy wars.
It buys them time and resilience against the very protests the author is trying to orchestrate.
Precisely. And at the exact same time, Vox is reporting, Viktor Orban has fallen?
The fall of Orban signifies a massive chaotic shift in European right-wing and autocratic politics, right?
It does. It suggests that the global momentum of illiberal democracies might be cracking. But that creates a perilous window where regimes either double down on repression or face collapse.
You also have headlines about an escalating global AI arms race, and the Times of India reporting that Japan is adopting new plans to boost nuclear energy by 2040.
If you synthesize all of those data points, you have failing peace talks, energy markets in turmoil, European political structures fracturing, and artificial intelligence Cold War accelerating, and major powers rushing to secure independent energy grids.
It's chaos.
In this chaotic April 2026, the author views the Iranian regime not merely as a regional human rights tragedy, but as the critical linchpin in a fracturing global order.
That explains the utter desperation of the text.
Yes.
He is throwing absolutely everything at the wall. He's demanding grassroots organizing. He's trying to legitimize aerial drone strikes, and he is praying for a sci-fi cyber weapon.
Because he believes that if the Iranian regime survives this specific window, they will leverage the $100 oil and the chaos in Europe to permanently lock in their power.
He believes the window for global transformation is closing.
And Iran is the key to unlocking what he calls an aged abundance, or sliding into a final catastrophic war.
His manifesto is basically an attempt to force a localized democratic victory to act as a circuit breaker for a global geopolitical meltdown.
That's exactly what it is.
Man, it is an incredible intellectual journey. We started with the unglamorous mechanics of forming a coalition with clipboards, and we ended up deploying theoretical liberty tech to prevent a global catastrophe.
It's quite a ride.
For you listening, I think what this deep dive truly illuminates is the fascinating, often contradictory way human beings attempt to solve massive, seemingly intractable problems.
We use whatever we have.
Right. When faced with deeply rooted tyranny, we reach for the oldest, most dangerous tool we have, standing shoulder to shoulder in the streets against armed men. And simultaneously, we reach for the newest, most theoretical tools we can barely comprehend.
God-like algorithms that can cleanly turn off a government.
Yeah. It highlights the eternal gap between our desire for human freedom and our technological reality.
We try to bridge that gap with strategy, hope, and often profound moral risk.
As we wrap up today, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. It builds on the tension we've explored between human action and technological saviors.
A big question.
If a technology like Mythos actually existed right now, an artificial intelligence capable of flawlessly, bloodlessly dismantling a tyrannical regime with zero collateral damage, just flipping a switch and removing the dictator overnight, would the resulting society truly value its democracy?
Right, without the sacrifice.
Or does a nation actually need the messy, difficult, deeply painful human struggle of building a common minimum program to forge a civic muscle that can actually sustain freedom in the long term?
It is the question of whether democracy is merely a clean destination you can be airlifted to by an algorithm or a complex human mechanism that must be built by hand to function.
Exactly. Keep questioning that intersection of technology, human resilience, and the cost of freedom. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, and we'll catch you next time.